You wake up in a world where people are driven by two invisible forces. Two engines that power everything from politics to romance, parenting to war, ambition to silence. And they are not truth and lies, not good and evil, not even freedom and control. They are fear and love. And here's the terrifying question Machiavelli forces us to ask. If you had to choose, would you rather be feared or loved? And even deeper, which do you actually live by even if you say otherwise? We're going to break this down like never before. We'll go beyond the shallow caricature of Machiavelli as some cold-hearted manipulator, because the truth is far more unsettling. Machiavelli didn't invent cruelty. He revealed its structure. He didn't destroy morality. He exposed its fragility. And when he said it's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both, he wasn't glorifying tyranny, he was unmasking the brutal logic of power. And here's where it gets personal. You and I make this choice every day, whether we know it or not.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's begin with the core. Machiavelli's The Prince isn't a book about how things should be. It's a book about how things are. He wrote it while living in exile, watching political chaos consume Italy. He saw men murdered for being too generous. He saw kind rulers overthrown by those they tried to help. He saw love betrayed and fear obeyed. So he asked, in a world of betrayal, ambition, and chaos, what actually works? And from that question came his most infamous answer: fear is more reliable than love. Now, before we reject this outright, we need to ask, is he wrong? Think about your own life. When someone loves you, they may be loyal, but only as long as their emotions align. Love fades. Love changes. Love is fragile. But fear binds. Fear forces. Fear lasts. That's not a moral statement. That's a psychological one. And Machiavelli wasn't naive. He understood that love is beautiful. But he also saw that it's unpredictable. And unpredictability in power is a liability. But here's the twist. He didn't say fear is better than love in a moral sense. He said it's safer, more stable, more effective in the brutal arena of politics. And that logic doesn't just apply to princes and kings, but it applies to you, to me, to every parent who disciplines their child, and to every boss who manages a team, to every influencer who cultivates a brand, or to every person who has ever tried to control an outcome. And now we're in dangerous territory, because we like to think we act from love, that we're motivated by kindness, compassion, connection. But how much of our behavior is actually just fear wearing a mask? Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being exposed. How often do we love others just enough to keep them close, but not enough to risk our own sense of control? Machiavelli's question isn't just about rulers. It's about us. And it's not asking what you believe, it's asking what you do. Let me ask you something. When you want someone to respect you, what do you reach for first, your warmth or your authority? Do you try to be liked, or do you try to be obeyed? And when you feel threatened by criticism, by disobedience, by indifference, do you respond with vulnerability? Or do you respond with dominance? These aren't abstract questions. They're the architecture of every relationship you have. And Machiavelli would say, watch closely because your instincts will reveal your truth. Let's go deeper. Love is reciprocal. It asks for trust. It requires openness. And because of that, it gives the other person power. They can disappoint you. They can leave you. They can hurt you. Fear, on the other hand, is one-directional. It doesn't require trust. It doesn't ask for permission. It takes power and doesn't give it back. That's why Machiavelli saw it as essential for rulers. Because a ruler who depends on love is a ruler who depends on the people. But a ruler who inspires fear controls the people even when love is gone. This is where things get uncomfortable. Because we realize that many of the systems we live in aren't built on love. They're built on fear. Schools that punish curiosity, workplaces that reward silence, governments that use surveillance more than trust, even families that use shame to keep children obedient. And we call these things discipline, structure, leadership. But what if they're really just sophisticated forms of fear? What if fear has been institutionalized so deeply that we no longer recognize it? Now, here's the crucial distinction. Machiavelli didn't say you must be feared. He said you must choose between fear and love when you can't have both. And that's the real dilemma. Because in an ideal world, the two would coexist. A leader would be both respected and loved. A parent both trusted and obeyed. A partner both admired and desired. But Machiavelli lived in the real world, and so do we. And that means you will, at some point, face a moment where being loved will make you vulnerable and being feared will make you safe. So what do you choose? Let's bring this into your own life. Have you ever avoided being honest with someone because you were afraid they'd stop loving you? Have you ever raised your voice not because you were angry, but because you needed to reassert control? Have you ever withheld affection, approval, or praise, not out of malice, but out of strategy? These are Machiavellian moments, not evil, human, and once you start noticing them, you realize we are all princes in our own kingdoms, and we all rule with some combination of fear and love. But here's where the real wisdom lies. Machiavelli wasn't just teaching us how to rule others. He was showing us how we are ruled by fear, by love, by the constant tug of war inside us between wanting to be safe and wanting to be seen, between the instinct to protect ourselves and the desire to connect. And that's the real battlefield, not politics, not leadership, but the human heart. So what does this mean for how we live? It means we have to become brutally honest with ourselves. We have to ask, am I acting from love or am I wielding fear? And even deeper, am I following someone because I love them or because I fear what will happen if I don't? These questions are unsettling, but they're the only way out of unconscious power dynamics. Because once we see the game, we can choose how we play it. And here's the most powerful idea Machiavelli never said, but his work implies. To live a life of true integrity, we must master both love and fear, and not to manipulate others, but to understand ourselves, to recognize when fear is useful and when it's a trap, to know when love is real and when it's just dependency in disguise, and to become rulers of our own inner kingdom, not tyrants, not victims, but wise sovereigns. So I ask you now, in the relationships that matter most to you, are you building them on fear or on love? And if you had to choose, if you absolutely had to, would you rather be feared or loved by those who matter most? In the next part, we're going to take this even further. We'll explore how Machiavelli's philosophy applies to modern power structures, from billionaires to influencers, from AI algorithms to authoritarianism, and we'll ask the question that could redefine what leadership really means in the 21st century. The world has changed since Machiavelli's time. Empires have fallen, democracies have risen, and kings have been replaced by CEOs, presidents, influencers, and even algorithms. But the core mechanics of power, the primal tension between fear and love, remains unchanged. In fact, it may be more relevant now than ever. Because in the modern world, power doesn't wear a crown, it wears a brand, a dashboard, a follower count. It sits behind screens and spreads through networks. And yet, it still whispers the same question Machiavelli asked 5 centuries ago: do you want to be feared or loved? And now, in this digital, hyper-connected, emotionally fragile era, we're forced to confront that question, not just as rulers or citizens, but as creators, consumers, and content. The entire internet is a theater of power. Every post is a statement of identity, every like an offering of approval, every unfollow a quiet stab of fear. We fear irrelevance, we crave validation, and we design our personas to be likable enough to be loved, but authoritative enough to be respected. That's not just psychology, that's Machiavellian strategy in a digital skin. And the most terrifying part: most of us aren't aware that we're playing this game. We think we're being authentic, when in fact we're optimizing ourselves, our words, our emotions, even our beliefs for social survival. Look at how modern leadership operates, whether in politics, business, or culture. Watch how world leaders speak. Watch how they handle crises. You'll see them walk a razor-thin line between empathy and assertion, between warmth and dominance. No one wants to admit it, but every powerful figure has to calculate: when do I comfort and when do I intimidate? Because if you only inspire love, you risk being seen as soft, weak, naive. But if you only inspire fear, you risk rebellion, isolation, or collapse. This is the paradox Machiavelli saw so clearly, and why he said it's best to be both loved and feared. But if you must choose, choose fear. Why? Because fear controls behavior, even when love disappears. Fear makes people act, even when their hearts aren't in it. Fear makes systems stable. And in a world where one wrong tweet can end a career, where cancel culture and mob outrage can destroy reputations overnight, modern leaders are learning the hard way that love is fickle, but fear protects. That's why power today is increasingly hidden. It's why companies use soft language while enforcing strict rules. It's why platforms use algorithms to manipulate behavior without ever admitting that they're doing so. It's why you get banned without explanation, shadow banned without clarity. Because fear, when cloaked in ambiguity, is the most effective control mechanism of all. But we need to go deeper, because Machiavelli's insight isn't just about how power is used, it's about how power is perceived. And perception is everything in the modern world. You don't just need to be powerful, you need to be seen as powerful. And here's where things get dangerous. In the age of social media, perception can be manufactured. You can present yourself as fearless, dominant, untouchable, even if you're insecure and lost inside. And people will believe it. They'll follow you. They'll obey. Because the image of power is often more influential than the reality. That's why influencers wield more sway than scholars. why billionaires are treated like prophets, why the loudest voice in a room can silence the wisest. And that's why so many people chase the aesthetics of fear and love without understanding the substance. But Machiavelli would warn us, power without substance eventually collapses. Fear that is unearned becomes tyranny. Love that is undeserved becomes manipulation. And at some point, the people see through the illusion. That's when revolt happens. That's when the algorithm turns on you. That's when the empire crumbles. Because no matter how clever your strategy, reality always wins in the end. So what does this mean for you, not just as a citizen of the digital world, but as a sovereign of your own life? It means you have to decide how you want to lead not just others, but yourself. You are the ruler of your habits, your attention, your decisions. And every day, you're choosing between fear and love. Do you motivate yourself through self-criticism, shame, threats? Or through compassion, vision, inspiration? Do you control others by withholding affection, approval, access? Or do you empower them by trusting, guiding, challenging? Most people live in a default state of self-rule by fear. They punish themselves for mistakes, suppress their desires, and obey society's expectations without examining them. That's Machiavelli's world inside your own mind. But it doesn't have to be that way. Because while Machiavelli revealed the mechanics of fear, he also hinted at something else, that true power isn't just about control, it's about clarity. It's about knowing when to be fierce and when to be gentle, when to assert and when to yield, when to be feared and when to be loved. And the only way to master that balance is to become radically honest with yourself, but to stop pretending you're always the hero, to stop hiding your hunger for control behind the mask of morality, to start asking, what kind of ruler am I really? And what kind of ruler do I want to become? Because here's the truth Machiavelli never wrote, but you feel it in your bones. The world doesn't just need more leaders. It needs more conscious ones. People who understand the mechanics of power so they can use it wisely. People who can be feared when necessary but choose love whenever possible. People who don't shy away from ambition but refuse to lose their humanity in the process. That's the new prince. That's the leader the world quietly hopes for. Maybe that's who you're becoming. So I'll leave you with this question, and it might sting. Do people follow you because they love who you are, or because they're afraid of what happens if they don't? And even more importantly, which of those would you choose if you had to choose today? In the next part, we'll explore how to build true power not through fear, not through popularity, but through something deeper, authentic influence. We'll break down how to lead without manipulation, how to create respect without coercion, and how to become someone others follow not out of fear or love, but out of trust. We've talked about fear. We've talked about love. We've seen how Machiavelli forced us to confront the uncomfortable truth that, when it comes to power, fear is often more reliable than love. But now comes the hardest part, the part Machiavelli couldn't fully write, because he was a man of his time, exiled, watching the world fall apart. But you are not exiled. You are not bound to the 16th century. You are not a pawn in someone else's kingdom. You are living in a new era, one where the rules are still being written. So the question is no longer just, should I rule with fear or love? The real question, the modern question is, can I lead without either? Can I lead with something stronger, something deeper. And that's where we arrive at the next evolution of power. Not fear, not love, but trust. Let's be brutally honest. Trust is harder than both. But fear is easy to create. All you need is a threat. Love is easier than we admit, to flattery, charm, affection, and people will follow you for a while. But trust, that takes time. It takes consistency. It takes a level of alignment between who you say you are and who you actually are that most people never reach. Yet when someone truly trusts you, not just likes you, not just obeys you, but trusts you, their loyalty doesn't depend on fear or appetite. It depends on respect. Not the kind of respect you demand, but the kind you earn. So how do you build that? You start by understanding that the new prince, the 21st century leader, is not someone who manipulates emotions, but someone who embodies values. You don't need to be loved by everyone. You don't need to be feared by anyone. You need to be clear. Clear in your values, clear in your actions, clear in your boundaries. People trust clarity. They distrust confusion. If you change your tune every time the crowd shifts, they won't love you more, they'll suspect you. If you lead with fear but can't follow through, they won't obey you, they'll resent you. But if you show up again and again with the same depth, the same courage, the same integrity, even when it's hard, they will trust you. And trust, once earned, is the most powerful force on earth. Because it doesn't require constant reinforcement. It doesn't require threats. It doesn't require seduction. It just is. So here's the final question, the one that Machiavelli could never fully answer, but that you must. What kind of power will you build? Will you choose the temporary control of fear, the fragile affection of love, or the enduring force of trust? You decide. But remember this, in the end, people don't follow the loudest voice. They follow the clearest one. Be that voice,